Nu metal is one of the most overhated heavy metal subgenres of all time. Starting in the 90s with a heyday lasting to the mid-2000s, the genre mixed hip-hop and rap elements with heavy metal furnishings that rubbed some fans of more classical-style heavy metal the wrong way, just like Amazon Prime adding advertisements to its subscription service in the most sleazy way possible. Unlike 80s metal, nu metal often had a distinct lack of expert guitar work, instead opting to focus on comparatively more stripped down and basic guitar riffs, as well as featuring very angsty and often juvenile lyricism that, at their absolute worst, can be comparable to a prepubescent 11-year-old gamer rage-quitting a match of Fortnite and cussing out any unfortunate soul who is listening on Xbox Live, basically blaming everyone else but themselves for the fact that they suck donkey balls. Get good, kid. And just like that very detailed example that I just gave, many heavy metal listeners believe that nu metal has a tendency to be cringecore. And to be fair, a lot of these critiques have merit. After all, the lack of variety in the guitar riffs and the low quality musicianship that some of these bands display can cause any listener to be bored and not want to engage with the music in a meaningful way. And that's even before we get to, in terms of the worst nu metal bands, the lyricism and vocals espoused by adult man-children portraying a tough guy persona, even though they are screaming, singing, or awfully rapping angsty lyrics akin to that earlier mentioned angry prepubescent 11-year-old yelling into the Xbox mic, all while everyone else who is unfortunately listening has to suffer a child's curse-ridden temper tantrum, which is bad enough on its own until you remember that with nu metal, it's a grown-ass man saying these things. Men who could easily go to a liquor store without being carded. How embarrassing. Because truly, in terms of musicianship and lyricism, nu metal can be heavy metal's bottom of the barrel subgenre. It can be far from perfect. However, I still believe that the nu metal genre still features value, terrific songs, classic albums, and even some undeniably great bands. While yes, bad nu metal is in fact really bad, I'm a firm believer that even reviled subgenres of heavy metal music still can have value and upstanding bands who do the idea and concept of those said genres justice, and that includes nu metal. And me, do I know this truth, because despite how terabad this genre can be, nu metal is one of my favorite heavy metal subgenres. Sure, as many of you know, I might try to bolster my heavy metal listening credentials by stating truth that I love the discographies belonging to Death, Fear Factory, High on Fire, and other groups that won't give me the "are you shitting me" side-eye that a few more traditional heavy metal elitists might display towards me in response, but the cold hard reality is that nu metal is one of my favorite heavy metal genres, and is so for a few reasons. And one of these said reasons is the nostalgia angle. As many of you know, I'm a millennial, meaning that as a kid of the 90s and the early 2000s, there were roughly 3 potential nostalgia musical routes that I could have gone in. The first of these is the most respectable in modern society, i.e. the pop, hip-hop, and rap music that many millennials listened to in the 90s and 2000s that the recent Super Bowl halftime shows have really marketed and executed to near perfection. Secondly, there's emo and punk, because we all knew those scene kids that could recite Green Day's American Idiot or My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade verbatim. And finally, there's The Last of Us, those of us undesirable, disgusting, loathable who dived headfirst into the nu metal garbage can. Because it's me, I'm in this picture of sad. I loved nu metal as a kid. If anything, I really gravitated towards the guitar riffs and the often juvenile lyricism of this genre because those guitar sounds were cool as fuck. And I related to childish lyricism because where many nu metal singers were adults pretending to be children, I was a child pretending to be an adult. You know, like most children. I just felt seen, for I was one angsty bitch. And for that, nu metal really stuck with me over the years, even as the downtuned fever dissipated in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Hell, to be clear, nu metal experienced a big backlash from the heavy metal listening audience for being quote-unquote false metal during this time, which then caused many nu metal bands during this era to branch out in other genres and styles of music to varying financial and or critical success, because if anything, nu metal became genre non grata. Yet even with that said, despite the arguments and anger against nu metal during this time, I still found myself gravitating towards this heavy metal subgenre, because, you know, kind of like my trans identity, me liking nu metal was not just a phase. While yes, I did eventually acknowledge that some of the bands that I liked during the 2000s were kind of shit, Limp Bizkit, Alien, and Far are. I remain steadfast in my love for groups like Slipknot, Korn, Deftones, Static X, and System of a Down, as well as a few albums and or songs by groups such as Linkin Park, Mudvayne, Rob Zombie, and such. And for a while, I honestly didn't know why this often overhated subgenre of music really resonated with me. Though of course I do know now, but that's a story for a future video. I just didn't understand why I still love this music. Yet with the passage of time, a lot of the metal community eventually came around and did an about face on nu metal, kind of like how many metal puritans did an about face on the once much hated glam metal many years earlier. In fact, in the late 2010s, the heavy metal community started to look back at bands like Slipknot and System of a Down and said, wait a second, a lot of this is actually really good. In fact, many of these bands have now become respectable legacy acts to the overall heavy metal genre. Like, you can go to any heavy metal show, regardless of subgenre, and see a solid percentage of the crowd rocking Slipknot t-shirts, and most people there would accept and respect that wardrobe decision and go, yeah, that fits. And then there's the fact that nu metal itself is receiving a critical reevaluation, that many nu metal bands, whether good or bad, are reforming as there is excitement surrounding their music. Quick aside, I'm just really happy that Kitty has returned. Their shit holds up really well. And then there's the fact that the hatred of nu metal itself has overall lessened to where there is less of a blanket disdain on the genre and more of a dislike for specific bands that are very popular, which honestly is universal in heavy music discourse beyond nu metal, because metal elitists are gonna metal elite. And as a result of all of these circumstances, many of these nu metal bands, while having a lot of fans even during the era where there was a big backlash against the whole genre, are now receiving respect from a lot of the heavy music listening populace. Respect that many of these nu metal bands have honestly always deserved. Furthermore, many exciting modern bands have spliced nu metal with other exciting genres of music. In fact, Code Orange, Tala, Tetrarch, Wargasm, Saint Agnes, and others incorporated nu metal into their sound in some capacity in a way that sounds new and fresh, like Nathan Drake promoting Subway sandwiches. If anything, these bands have more or less modernized the genre. And for all that, somehow, nu metal has returned. Whether we are discussing the reappraisal of first-generation nu metal acts from the 90s and 2000s, or new bands utilizing the genre in their sound, it has become clear that, despite the genre featuring some downright unlistenably bad bands, there are reasons why nu metal has and still does capture the attention of many listeners. It honestly has merits, and I look forward to discussing those said merits very soon.